Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, it's lovely to have you here, so thank you very much for tuning in. So today I am going to be continuing to work on the renovation of this doll's house. So if you haven't watched my videos before, I'm turning this miniature house into a converted warehouse with a contemporary art gallery on the ground floor and a modern open plan apartment above. And if you watched my last video, you will know that I was planning lots of different options for the layout of this apartment. And thank you so much to everybody who left comments on my last video, on the shorts that I've done recently, and also on my Instagram posts as well, because all of your ideas have really helped me to choose how to plan out this apartment, starting with this mezzanine level. Now, I've decided to change this mezzanine level slightly from what I showed you in the previous video. I've started by making it a little bit smaller, as you can see. I intend for this to be above the kitchen, so the kitchen units will go here and here, and I want to put some spotlights just here in the centre, so beyond the kitchen units. So I'm just doing some measuring here to work out where the little spotlights will go, because I need to drill some holes in. So all of the comments and recommendations on the last few videos were brilliant. It really was amazing to see such a huge variety of ideas. It's such a shame that I can't use all of the ideas, but I do really want you to know that I really appreciate your ideas because they've really helped me to think about exactly what will work in the space that I have. I've actually also written a lot of suggestions down so that I can use them in future projects. So it's been really helpful, thank you so much. So here I'm just cutting out the little holes where the spotlights will go, because this will be the ceiling for the kitchen, and I'm just using my pin drill to make a hole through the plywood. I did actually already have some holes drilled into the plywood for the spotlights, but because I chose to change the size of the mezzanine level, it meant that the little holes needed to go into a different position. So I've decided that the mezzanine level will now go on the left hand side above this door. As you can see, the door frame isn't very neat. So one of my first jobs is to create a new door frame, and I still need to attach this door. As you can see, I've not got any hinges. So I'm going to put a new door frame around this little door. I had already put a green door frame on the inside of the space for the door, but I'm going to do one that's around that green door frame. So I'm not going to take the green door frame away because it looks quite nice from the outside of the house. So I looked through the wood that I've collected over time, and I think this wood is probably going to be the best one to use. This is actually skirting boards that I removed from the house initially. I've used these skirting boards for the window frame in the centre of the doll's house on the outside as well, and I just think it's a great width for things like a door frame or a window frame. So I spent a lot of time measuring, and I was trying really hard to make sure that I got all of the measurements correct. And I cut out my 3 pieces of wood using my mitre shears. It all fit together nicely until I realised that I'd measured this piece incorrectly, and I know exactly what I did wrong. So on the edge of my ruler I couldn't measure from 0, I had to measure from the very end of the ruler when I put my ruler into the doll's house because it had to be right from the base, from the floor that I was measuring from. So it meant there was about an extra centimetre on the end, and when I was measuring this piece I forgot about that extra centimetre. So I had a choice of either to join one bit to the bit that I'd already cut, or to cut a new piece out of this piece of wood, which was a slightly different colour. I opted for using this piece of wood that was a slightly different colour. Due to the fact that I was using 2 different colours of wood for this door frame, I did put a little picture up on my YouTube channel on a post and in a story, and I also posted it on Instagram as well, and asked for opinions on whether you thought I could leave this as a wooden door frame or whether I needed to paint it green to match the other woodwork in the house. And interestingly, the polls came out at a completely 50-50 split. So 50% of the votes said keep it as wood, and 50% of the votes said paint it green. So I decided to stick it in place and have a little think. Now, before sticking it in the house, I laid the door here and thought, oh no, I've measured wrong, because look at the big gap around the door. So I thought, never mind, I will just cut this top piece down to size and then it will all fit. I was confused because I had spent quite a long time measuring, so I thought that I had measured correctly. So I cut this little piece down to size. And then I thought I was ready to stick these pieces into place. Everything now looked like it fit correctly. However, when I held this up in the doll's house, I realised that I had initially cut it the correct size because I'd forgotten that I was going to be putting it around the outside of the green door frame that was already there. So this now meant that it was too short, so I had to cut it out again. So now it was the correct size, or so I thought. I decided to stick it in place. Now, if you look really carefully, you might notice that the piece of wood at the top is a little bit too long here, so I did then remove it and trim it down, and then finally, it all fit nicely. You may be wondering, where am I going to put the bathroom, because I've made my mezzanine level smaller. Well, I decided that I was going to go into the loft space. If you look through this little window, you will see that the loft space is actually painted quite nicely. It's as if you can access the loft space and decorate it. But unfortunately, I can't get into the loft space, so I think that the loft must have been decorated before the doll's house was made, before the roof was put on. So I decided to use my Stanley knife at first to score along the ceiling to see if I could cut through the wood by hand, but unfortunately I couldn't. So I decided to change the fitting on my Dremel to this little sort of like a circular saw fitting, and I decided to use my Dremel to remove part of the ceiling. Now this could have gone really wrong, but I was just really hoping that it would go right. I did the same thing with my Tudor doll's house where I removed a big piece of the floor, and in the end I was really glad that I'd gone for it. But this isn't something that I recommend to anybody that you do because it could really have gone not to plan, and yeah, I'll show you soon whether this went to plan or not. Now, just as I always say, please don't copy any of my techniques or methods here. I am not an expert. As I always say, this is just a diary entry, it's a hobby for me. I tried to make sure that I was being as safe as possible. For example, I made sure that I wore safety goggles and ear defenders and a mask, but I can't guarantee that I'm doing everything in the safest way possible. So please don't copy my methods, and if you're wanting to do anything similar, please do consult someone who is a professional so that they can give you the best advice. So I tried to remove the part of the ceiling that I wanted to, but I couldn't actually get the Dremel at the angle that I needed to cut along the line where I wanted to cut. So instead I removed the centrepiece here, and then I was going to think about how to remove the edges. As you can see, it was a really dusty job, so I was glad that I was wearing my mask, and I also had my door to my garden open so that I had lots of ventilation. And I also made sure that my cat wasn't in the room and she was nowhere near, because obviously I don't want her breathing in any of the dust. Now, because I'd scored along the line where I wanted to cut away, it actually meant that when I just gently pulled at the piece of roof that was left, it came away really neatly. So this was really lucky. It seemed to have slotted into this gap here, so it meant that I could remove these pieces really easily. So next I just needed to fill this gap. So I gave it a quick sand and then just used some filler mixture to fill in the gap before sanding it again. Obviously I let the filler dry before sanding it. I should have put some sort of mat or some sort of sheet to cover this because I didn't really envisage quite how dusty this was going to be. So I did have a quick tidy up at this point. So I was just using some multi-purpose filler. I bought lots of this when I was using it to make the brickwork from the outside of my house, and I just keep it in a little airtight container so that the moisture can't get into it when I'm not using it. and I first put far too much water into this mixture, so I did have to add a little bit more powder until I had a consistency that looked like this. So I filled all of the gaps that I could find. And I also used this opportunity to fill any other little gaps as well, because I had made a little bit too much mixture. Do make sure that if you are ever using anything like filler that you read the instructions and any safety information first, because some mixtures might say that you can't use them without gloves. And obviously I have a lot of the mixture on my hands here. So yeah, if you're doing anything similar, please do read and follow any safety instructions, because all fillers and all different materials are different. So I lined this edge with some pieces of wood just to make it look nice and neat. I only had really thin pieces of wood left, which is why I've used 3 here, and then I'm just filling the little gap in between them with some filler. Ideally it would have been better to just use one piece of wood that was a little bit wider. So this is how everything was looking. So the bedroom was going to go on the first mezzanine level and the bathroom is going to go up in the loft space. Now it was time to tidy everything whilst the filler was drying. Now whilst I was tidying all of these pieces away, I realised that I had a really lovely little bathroom set in my box of miniatures. And I popped it to one side because I like to make all of my miniatures, but actually this is such a lovely little sort of porcelain bathtub and sink, and so I thought maybe I could pop them up into the loft space rather than make my own. So when everything was dry, it was time to give it all a sand and then to wipe away any of the dust before painting. So it was really convenient that this attic space had already been painted, and it seemed to have been painted in the exact same shade of white that I've painted the rest of the doll's house in. So it meant that everything looked really lovely and cohesive, and I didn't have to paint all of the attic space. I also painted the little ceiling that will go above the kitchen, which will make the mezzanine level, and I'd filled this little area where the green door frame was, so I needed to paint this as well. I decided to opt to not paint all of the door frame green because I think it looks quite nice as it is. I added a little piece of wood to go along here, just above the door frame, because this is where the mezzanine level was going to sit. And I didn't use a spirit level for this because I wanted to follow the sort of line of the door frame. But I did then use this to measure out to see where to put the piece of wood that would go along the back wall. Ideally, I think I could do to buy some little cocktail sticks so that I can use these to apply the glue a little bit more neatly when it's such a small surface area. Of course, these 2 tiny pieces of wood won't be enough to support the mezzanine and all of the furniture that will sit on top of it. So now it was time to make a little supporting post that will go underneath the mezzanine. So I used some balsa wood to cut out 2 end pieces for the post, which I sanded down to give them a nice smooth texture, but also to give a little bit of a rounded shape on the edges, like this. And then I used a piece of dowel to make the main centrepiece for the post. Now, the height of the entire post needed to be 17.7 centimetres, plus that little bit of extra that's at the end of the ruler, because obviously I had to measure from the end of the ruler. And then I had to subtract 2 centimetres because that was the height of the 2 pieces that I'd just cut from the balsa wood. So I then sanded down the ends of this piece of dowel just to make them neat, and I glued all of the pieces together. When they were dry, I painted them with the same colour green so that there's a nice cohesive look across the house. And then once this was dry, I covered this with some Mod Podge with a gloss finish because I want it to look like it's a metal post that's been painted. This is only my second time using Mod Podge, so thank you so much because I was recommended it by quite a few people and I think it's going to be something that comes in quite handy for a lot of crafting projects. So as that was drying, I decided to add the spotlights to the little mezzanine level so that they would shine down onto the kitchen area. So just like I made the spotlights for my gallery space, I used this little battery pack of lights. If you're doing something similar, again, please don't copy me because I don't think these lights get hot. They don't seem to have got hot when I've tested them, but I don't want to recommend them just in case they're not fit for this purpose. Really, I'm hardly ever going to be turning them on, and when I do turn them on, it's only ever going to be whilst I'm sat next to my doll's house looking at it. But I don't want you to copy me just in case they're not the right sort of equipment for the job, because you can buy lighting that's specially made for dolls' houses, so please don't copy what I'm using here. So I glued the little post to the floor, but I haven't yet glued it at the top to the mezzanine, and I haven't yet glued the mezzanine to the pieces of wood that were going along the two walls. I am going to be sitting an extra level above all of the lights here, and I'm not sticking it in place yet because I want to add the carpet, and I think it would be a bit easier to add the carpet to this piece of wood whilst it's not glued in place. In addition to this, the little staircase I make in the next video will add an extra supporting structure for this mezzanine level to sit on. So once I've made the carpet and the staircase, that's when I'll probably glue all of the mezzanine level into place. As you may be able to see, the upper piece of wood isn't completely flat, so I'm just going to stand these little candles on to add a little bit of weight to see if it will help to make it a little bit more flat. But when I do glue it down onto the little blocks of wood that I've just put in place, I'm hoping that it will keep it at a nice sort of flat level. So at the moment, this is how everything's looking. In the next video, I am going to be doing the mini staircase, so I'll talk to you then about what sort of staircase or ladder I've chosen. But yeah, for now, this is where we're up to. I can really imagine now what's going to go into each area, and I love the fact that I now have space for a full bedroom and a full bathroom with the kitchen and a living room as well. This is what the doll's house looked like when I first bought it. Now obviously it's very different and the use of the space is going to be very different. If you have any ideas of what you think I should add, please let me know. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you've not subscribed already. Please do leave a comment because it's so lovely to hear from everybody. And I will hopefully see you in the next video. Thank you, bye bye!